Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching you how to make a ruffle top. Was feeling dainty, so we went for some large ruffles, scoop neckline, and a comfy scrunch fit. Overall, I'd say we hit the high marks for this cute factory and we kept it light and airy. Speaking of, if you're looking for something light and airy or big to keep you warm, we've got you covered. We've got hundreds of modern crochet designs with plenty more coming, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado, for this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 275 grams of yarn, and that's 600 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 6 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite mobile game. For me, I don't game too much anymore, but when I do, I love playing Plants vs. Zombies 2. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is for size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook and get started on our prep chain. Now our prep chain isn't actually going to be worked into the piece, we just need to know how many rows we're going to make for the collar. Now first we're going to make an even numbered chain from mid collarbone to mid collarbone. So I've already measured mine out. I need a total of 7 inches or 19 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain of 32. And now that we have our chain, I'm going to insert my stitch marker into that last chain. And now from here, we're going to make a chain that's now in multiples of 3 that reaches up and over our shoulder to our back. So I need a chain of about 6.5 inches or 17 centimeters, which is going to be a chain of 27. So I am back, and this is what we should have so far. Now we actually don't need to do the rest of the chain just because this is the prep chain. We just needed to know the front panel, which is going to be the same as the back panel's chain numbers, and the shoulder, which is going to be the same as the other shoulder. So just make sure that we keep our numbers in mind for when we do our collar. So go ahead and write down these numbers if you guys have to, but now we can put this away and then we can get started on the actual height of our collar. Now getting started on our collar, we're going to grab the same category 4 yarn, make a slip knot, grab our 5 millimeter hook again, and now we're all going to start by making a chain the height that we would like for our collar to be. Now I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 5. So now that I have my chain, we're going to slip stitch all the way down. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch, and all that's going to be is inserting our hook. And when we have those 2 loops, just yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Just like that, let's do another one. Inserting our hook into that following chain, yarn over, and pull through everything. And continue to put 1 slip stitch into every chain. And a really quick tip is make sure that we're not tugging too tightly on our working yarn, otherwise our falling rows can be too tight to work into. And now that we've made our way all the way down our chain, we're just going to continue to do slip stitches for the remainder of our collar, but now they're going to be within the back loops. So start with the chain 1, flip our work, and we're going to find that last stitch from our previous row and insert our hook into that back loop, yarn over, and pull through everything. Remembering not to tug too tightly. There's our first back loop slip stitch. Let's do another one. Inserting your hook into that following stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over, pull through everything, and that's it. Continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And at the end of our row 2, just chain 1, Flip our work and then continue to put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. Now this portion that we're working out first is going to be the same amount of chains that we made working across our chest. So I had a total of 32 chains across my chest, so I will be doing a total of 32 back loop slip stitch rows, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so I'm back with the first half of my collar. I have a total of 32 rows, and this was my front panel. Now from here, we're going to continue on to do our back loop slip stitch rows. That's not going to be any different, but we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into the last row that we have, and then into the following row for our shoulder, just so we know where things are separated so we don't have to come back and do it later. So this is my last row right here, which is this divot. I'm going to take my blue stitch marker stitch. Obviously you guys can pick whatever color you want, but we just want to make sure that we're using two different colors so we know what is what. And then from here, we're going to do our following side slip stitch row, which is going to be the first row, counting for our shoulder, and insert our second colored stitch marker stitch into there. So all I'm going to do is chain one, flip my work, and then put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the end of this row. Alright, so I just made my way all the way down with my back loop slip stitch row. I'm going to take my next stitch marker stitch and just insert it into the edge of that row as well. And then from here, we're going to do the same amount of chains that we made when we did our shoulder chain. So including this first row, I'm going to make a total of 27 and then insert my purple stitch marker into that last stitch just so I know where our shoulders are going to be at. And then once we have those amount of rows all finished up, we're just going to continue on with making the same amount of rows that we need for the back panel, which is the same as the front, and then do the shoulders as well, making sure that we're inserting our color-coded stitch markers. So I'm going to get the rest of my collar all finished up, and then I'll meet you guys back just to show you what mine look like. Alright, so I'm back with the entirety of the length of my collar, and I made sure that I inserted my stitch markers right where they needed to be. So just to remind you guys, we started off with our chest, our shoulder portion, our back, which is the same amount of side rows as our chest, and then our second shoulder portion, which is the same amount of rows as our first shoulder portion. But once we have all this all finished up, we are going to seam it together. So let's all start by inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. And this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, so let's all yarn over, pull through everything, and let's get started on the first one. So let's all start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert our hook only in through that front loop or the loop that's nearest to us. So insert your hook into there. And then into the back panel, we're going to find that next available stitch and then insert our hook only into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us. And then once we have those three loops on our hook, we're just going to yarn over, pull through all three. Now this should look just like another slip stitch row, so let's do another one. Finding that next available stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. Yarn over, pull through all three, and then that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and then I'll meet you back so we can clean up the edge. So now that our collar is all seamed up, we're next just going to single crochet into every side row, making sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into that stitch that's worked into that side row once when we get there. And we are going to need to switch out our hook to our 6mm hook as well. So go ahead and insert your 6mm hook onto our working yarn, chain one, and let's get started. So this is my first side row right here, which is this divot. Now I do have a stitch marker stitch into there, so all I'm going to do is take this out for now, then find that top loop, insert my hook into there with a single crochet, and then into that stitch that we just made, insert our stitch marker back into there. And we're just going to continue to do that, making our way all the way around. So just to do the next one, this is my following side row, which is this raised row. I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop with a single crochet, and then just to do the next one, which is this divot right here, insert your hook into that top loop with another single crochet, and that's it. We're just going to continue to do this, making our way all the way around. And a quick tip, just make sure that we're not accidentally switching out our colors once when we get to each of those sections, because we have nicely sectioned everything off and it could get a little confusing later on. But go ahead and make your way all the way around with our single crochet row, slip stitch into that chain space that we made, do a chain up of one and cut, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so I'm back and I've just finished up single crocheting all the way around my collar, making sure that I did insert my stitch markers into the same side rows that they were worked into, making sure that everything's all still color coordinated. But from here, I did do a chain up of one and cut, and we're actually done with working on the collar for now, so we're just going to put this away and then we can get started on the front panel. So getting started on the front panel, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn again, make a slip knot, grab our 6mm hook, and we're all going to start by making a chain that is in multiples of 3, starting from about an inch right underneath our underarm down to where we want the bottom of this top to be, keeping in mind that we will have a bottom band. So if you guys want to make this cropped, make fewer chains, or if you want this long, make more chains. But I want mine to be just about 7 inches or 18 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 27. So now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first sedge stitch row. So right after our chain, we're going to insert our hook into that second chain from our hook with a half double crochet and a double crochet. So we're going to skip that first chain into that second. We're going to yarn over and insert our hook into that chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. That's a half double crochet. And then into that same chain is going to be a double crochet. So yarn over, into that same chain, pull through the first 2, pull through the last 2. Now that half double crochet set is always going to be how we start off our first sedge stitch set for every row. But all the other sedge stitch sets after this one is going to be a single half double and then a double into the same stitch. So let's get that started. So right after this set, we are going to skip the following 2 chains. So we're going to skip 1, skip 2, then into that third chain is going to be worked with a single half double double all into that same chain. So there's our single, there is our half double, and then into that same chain, a double crochet. Just like that. Now we have 1, 2 sedge stitch sets. Let's do another one. Now after every set, we're always going to skip 2 because that half double crochet, and the double crochet in that set counts as these 2 stitches. If we're working into either of those, we're going to be increasing, which is fine, but not what we want to do just yet. So we're going to skip 1, skip 2, into that following chain, a single, into that same chain, a half double, and then into that same chain with a double. And that's it. We're just going to continue to do our sedge stitch set, making our way all the way down. Our last sedge stitch set is going to be worked into that second to last chain, so I'll meet you back when we have just one more so that we can increase together. Alright, so we've just made our way all the way down with our sedge stitches. We should all have 1 chain left, and into that chain we're going to do an increase. So how that increase is going to work is we're going to do a single half double double and then an extra double crochet into that last stitch. So that's going to be an increase of 4. So into that last chain, insert your hook, starting with a single crochet, into that same last chain with a half double crochet, and then into that same last chain, 2 double crochets. So there's my first one, and then 1 more into there, and this is my second one. Now once we have that, we're only going to be increasing into every other row. So from here, what we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and then into the last stitch from our previous row, start with our first sedge stitch set, which, like I said, is always going to be a half double crochet and double crochet into that first stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook into that first stitch with a half double, and then into that same first stitch with a double crochet, and then from there, skip 2 stitches into that following stitch. Our following sedge stitches, which is always going to be a single, a half double, and then a double. And we're going to continue to do this, making our way all the way down until we have 2 stitches left. But a fun fact that I have right before I leave you guys when it comes to our sedge stitches is each of our sedge stitch sets is going to be worked into our previous row's single crochet. So just as a really quick example, I just finished a set and we're going to be skipping 1, 2 stitches just like how we've been doing, and we're going to do our set into that following stitch. And that's going to give us a texture that we want because it is in our single crochet stitch. And we can tell because it's a little bit lower than the other 2 stitches that we have. Alright, so I've made my way all the way down and we should have 2 stitches left. If it looks like we just have 1 stitch left, just double check and flip your work if you have to. Sometimes our last stitch that we have looks a little tucked underneath, so it's very easily overlooked. But all we're going to do is skip that second to last stitch and then half double crochet into the last one because we're now at the bottom and we need this to be blunt. So just yarn over, skip the second to last stitch and then into that last stitch with just 1 half double crochet. And then from here, it's just going to be a repeat of these 2 rows. So let's just get started on the following row really quickly. From here, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then do our first sedge stitch, which is always going to be a half double crochet, and then double crochet into that first stitch. Skip 1, skip 2 into the following, a single half double and then a double. And we're just going to continue to repeat this, making our way all the way down, and now we'll have 2 stitches left. So we've made our way all the way down with our row 3. We have 2 stitches left, and just like how we ended off row 1, except now we have 2 stitches left, we're going to do an increase. So skip that second to last stitch, and then into the last one, insert your hook into there with a single, with a half double, and then 2 double crochets all into that same last stitch. And that is our increase. And from here, we're just going to do our following row, which every even number row isn't going to have an increase, so just chain 1, and then do our sedge stitch, making our way all the way down, making sure that we end the row with a half double crochet into that last stitch because we need the bottom to be blunt. And from here, we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until this can reach from mid-underarm over to the front of our body, right where the chest stitch marker is on our collar. And I'll meet you guys back right after an odd number row along the top, just so we can work straight into the collar from there. Alright, so I am back with the underarm portion of my front panel. Now I have a total of about 7 rows, my width is just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, and now we're going to want to make a chain that is also in multiples of 3 that can connect into the collar. So the chain that I have to make is actually just going to be an inch or 2 centimeters, so it's just going to be a chain 3 for me because I want my sweater to be a little cropped. But just keep in mind that the higher you make your chain, the wider that you're going to make your armholes. So you're going to want to try to make this chain not too long because we don't want our armholes to be too big. We just want this to fit nice and comfortably right underneath our underarm. So I'm going to start off by making my chain 3 and then grabbing my collar. Okay, so now that we have our chain, we're going to want to slip stitch it into our stitch marker stitch that we have for the chest. Now, if you guys remember, my chest stitch markers were my blue ones. So I'm just going to insert my hook into there. And all I'm going to do is yarn over and pull through everything to secure the underarm to the collar. And this is what we should have. And now from here, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch that we have into the collar, making sure that we're working towards the other chest stitch marker stitch. And then we can get started on the following row. So this part's going to be pretty simple. Find that following stitch that we have. Insert your hook into there, yarn over, pull through everything, flip our work, and then start with our stitches. So just to show you how we're going to work into our chain, which is going to be the same way that we've worked every other row, we're always going to start with our first sedge set, which is always going to be a half double and double crochet into that first chain. You're going to skip 2 and then into that following chain, which for me, it's my first stitch into the body, our single, half double, double, and then make our way all the way down, leaving 2 stitches, and then do a half double crochet into that last stitch because we still need the bottom to be blunt. And then from there, chain 1, flip our work, do our sedge stitches, making our way all the way back up, leaving the last 2, and then I'll meet you guys back just to remind you how we're going to connect it into the base once more. So I just made my way all the way down and all the way back up with my first 2 body rows, and now we're just going to end it and then connect it into the base together. So along the outer end and along the base, we're always going to have 2 stitches left at the end and then close it off with a half double crochet because we don't need to be doing any increases anymore. So yarn over, skip that second to last stitch, and then into the last stitch, insert with a half double crochet. And once we have our half double crochet, we're going to connect it into the base. So just find the following stitch into the base, slip stitch into there to close off this row, and then just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch up 1 stitch, flip our work, and then repeat. And that's it. We're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we reach our following stitch marker stitch, and then I'll meet you back so we can close it off with our underarm. Alright, so I've just made my way all the way across from stitch marker to stitch marker, and now we're ready to do our underarm portion along the other side. So first things first, we're going to want to make sure the work is flipped right side out, and then we're going to need to insert our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made along this side. So if you guys have my numbers, I only made a chain of 3. So from the top right here, I inserted my stitch marker into the 3rd stitch. Now since we all should have ended along the bottom, I'm going to do a chain 1, flip my work, and then do my sedge stitch, making my way all the way up until I have 5 stitches right before my stitch marker stitch, and then I'll meet you back so we can decrease together. All right, so I've made my way all the way up, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches right before my stitch marker stitch, and now we're going to be doing a decrease of 4 double crochets. So we're all going to yarn over. We're going to skip that following stitch, and then into that 4th to last stitch, we're going to insert, pull through, into that following stitch, pull through, 2nd to last stitch, pull through, last stitch, and pull through. Now all together we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 loops on our hook. So we're going to yarn over, pull through the first 5 loops to ultimately get 2 loops on our hook, and then just yarn over, pull through 2. And that is our decrease of 4. Now we're only going to be decreasing into every other row because we only increased into every other row on the other side. So whenever we're along the top just like this, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch, making our way all the way down with nothing fancy to it. Once we reach the end of the row, get started on your following sedge stitch, leaving the last 5 stitches again because I want to decrease just once more. Alright, so I've made my way all the way back up with my following sedge stitch row, and I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 loops. And just like the previous decrease row, we're going to do a decrease of 4 double crochets again. So yarn over, skip that following stitch, insert your hook into that 4th to last, pull through, 3rd to last, pull through, 2nd to last, pull through, and then that last stitch, pull through. We're going to yarn over, pull through the first 5, yarn over, pull through 2, and then that's it. From here, we're just going to chain 1, flip our work, and then continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the other side. Once we do, go ahead and do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I'm back with the entirety of my front panel. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut, and so I had the same amount of underarm rows, and now we're going to repeat everything that we just did here for the back panel. So I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So it's going to be done exactly the same for the back. So make the same amount of chains, same amount of increased rows for our underarm, same chain that reached all the way up to our band, and then we're going to make sure that we're slip stitching it into the stitch marker stitch that we have that's for our chest, or I guess now our back only. Work our way all the way across, and then do our underarm. Once we have that all finished up, go ahead and do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so I am back, and I have just finished up my front and my back panel, and now we're going to seam it all together. So first things first, we're going to start by inserting our 6mm hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Right after that, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and now we're just going to do a single crochet seam, so let's get that started. We're all going to start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert our hook into there, and then find that next available stitch into the back panel, insert your hook into there, and if you guys want to, go ahead and place your tail ends over those loops, single crochet around everything, and now our first single crochet for our single crochet seam is all finished up, and now our tail end is in the middle of our single crochet as well, so we don't need to weave it in later. Let's do another one. Into that following stitch into the front panel, for me this is a chain. I'm going to insert my hook into that chain, and then finding that next available stitch into the back panel, insert your hook in through that loop, and then single crochet, and then that's basically it. We're just going to continue to do this, making our way all the way down, and when we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. Alright, so now that everything is all seamed up, the next thing we're going to do is our sleeve. So we're going to need to prep for our sleeve just a little bit, and that's only going to be a single crochet row, making our way all the way around our armhole that we have. So first things first, make sure that our work is slipped right side out, meaning the seam that we have is along the inside. And then we're going to be inserting our 6mm hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. Go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and just working up our underarm, we're going to be alternating between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So this might be a little difficult to see, but this is my first side row right over here. All I'm going to do is insert my hook into there, starting with just 1 single crochet. And then this is my following side row right over here, this gap. I'm going to insert my hook into there with 2 single crochet. There's 1 into that same side row with my second, and that's it. We're going to keep working our way all the way up until we reach the single crochets or chains that we have once we made it into the single crochets or the chains that we made once we made our way all the way up to our band. So now that I've just made my way all the way up my underarm, we're now just going to put one single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up to the collar. And then once we reach the bottom of the collar, we do have stitches to work into, so just one single crochet into each of those. So what we're going to do is just find that first stitch, insert with one, following stitch, insert with one, and I just have one more right before I reach the collar, so I'm just going to do that one with you guys as well. And then from here, our stitch markers should be there, but we don't need them anymore, so I'm just going to take both of them out. And then I'm going to find that first available stitch into the bottom of the collar. So as you guys can see, this is the first stitch that we have, but it is taken up by our front panel. So I'm just going to insert my hook into that first available stitch with a single and then make my way all the way around. Once we don't have any more stitches left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space that we made when we started off this row, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so I've just made my way all the way around with my first single crochet row, and now we're going to do our first row when it comes to doing the detail for our sleeve, and that's just going to be more sedge stitch rows, but we're actually going to be doing an increase. So what we're going to do right after we slip stitch into that chain space, we're going to chain one, and then working in that same direction, we're going to start with our first sedge stitch, which is always going to be just a half double and double, but we should already know this by now. So just insert your hook into that first stitch with a half double and then a double crochet. And then to do our increase, we're going to skip one stitch and then into the following two stitches, one set into each of those. So I'm going to skip one into that following stitch, my regular sedge, which is a single, half double double into one stitch, and then into the following, another single, half double crochet, and then double crochet all into that same stitch. And then now we should have 1, 2, 3 sets all finished up. And once we have those two sedge stitches right next to each other, we're going to skip a stitch and then do one singular sedge stitch by itself. So skip the following stitch and then into the stitch right after, a single, a half double, and then a double. So this is going to be our stitch sequence. We're going to have one sedge stitch set, skip a stitch, two sedge stitch sets right next to each other, skip a stitch, and then another singular sedge stitch set. Now a really quick tip that I like to do is insert my stitch marker into where our singular sedge stitch sets are, so not into the sets that are right next to each other. And I just like to do that because if we look at this for too long, everything can get a little blurred and can get a little confusing. But I'm just going to insert my stitch markers into those standalone sets and then repeat. So since we just did another singular set, I'm going to skip one stitch, put one sedge stitch set into each of the following, and then repeat, making our way all the way around. And when we make our way all the way around, we do want to make sure that we're half double crocheting into that last stitch. So it all depends on how many stitches we actually have. Some of us may have just one stitch left, some of us may have two stitches left, but that's completely fine. Just make sure that you don't do a sedge stitch set into that last stitch that we have in this row, because we're going to have to do a half double crochet together. So I'll meet you guys back. Alright, so I've just made my way all the way around with my first sedge stitch row. As you guys can see, I have all of my increases into place. And we're going to close this row off with our last half double crochet. So I have a total of 2 stitches left. If you guys have one, that's completely fine. All we're going to do is yarn over, and then just into that last stitch, insert with one half double crochet. That's always going to be how we end our sedge stitch rows. And then right after that, we're going to slip stitch into that chain space, chain one, and flip our work. Now when it comes to doing our sedge stitch, we're only going to be increasing into every 4th row. So this row and the 2 following rows are not going to have any increases or decreases into them. So I'm just going to get this next row started off with you guys. Now right after we've done our chain one, I have flipped my work and I'm going to insert my first sedge stitch into the half double crochet from my previous row, which should be my first stitch, which is this one right here. Let's yarn over, insert our hook into the top of that half double crochet with just a half double, and then a double, and this is going to be completely normal. So skip 2 stitches into that following stitch, a single, half double, double, and then that's it. Since we already know how to do our sedge stitches, I'm going to let you guys do the following 3 rows on your own. Just as a quick reminder, make sure that we're always ending off our row with a half double crochet, and then after every row we're going to do a chain one and flip. I'll meet you guys back once we're about to get started on our 6th row, and that's 6 row in total, counting our first single crochet row as well, so that we can do another increase row together. Alright, so I am back and I now have a total of 5 rows. starting with my first row, which was a single crochet row. Our second row was our increase row, and then 3 falling rows of sedge stitches with no increases and no decreases. And like I said, we're going to be increasing into every 4th row. So I'm going to show you guys how we're going to be doing this row's increase and then all the increases from here on out. So we all should have slip stitched into that chain space and then do a chain 1. And then this row's increase is actually going to be very similar to our first increase, but instead of just having 2 sets next to each other, we're going to have 3. So let's just do the first set together. Now into the half double crochet from our previous row, we're going to do our first sedge stitch set, which is always just a half double and then a double. And then from here, we're going to skip the following stitch and then into the next 3 stitches. So here's my first, second, and third stitch, 1 set into each of those. So skip the following stitch, into the one right after that, a single, a half double, and then a double. Into the stitch right after that one, a single, a half double, and then a double, and then once more into that following stitch. So starting with a single, half double, and then double crochet. And then just like how we did the previous one, we're going to skip a stitch and then into the following stitch, which just to double check and make sure, should be a single crochet from our previous row. We're going to do our singular sedge stitch set. So skip 1 stitch, into the following, a single, half double, and double. And I will still be inserting my stitch markers into our singular sets just so I can keep track of where I'm at. So there's my first one. And here's my second one. And now all together we should have 1 singular set, a skip stitch, 3 sets right next to each other, another skip stitch, and then a singular set. And that's it. From here we're going to continue to do this repeat, making our way all the way around. And then slip stitch into that chain space. Right after that, 3 sedge stitch rows with absolutely no increases and no decreases. And then into the row after that, if you want to continue on with your rows, another increase row just like this one that we're doing right here. And that's it. It's just going to be a 4-row repeat just like that until we get the length of the sleeve that we would like, and then do a chain up 1 and cut once we have our length, and I'll meet you guys back. Alright, so I'm back and I have just finished up the length of my sleeve. And I have a total of 13 rows, and as you guys can see, I did a chain up 1 and cut and did the same thing that I just did here on the other side. And once we have both of our sleeves all finished up, we're going to switch back out to our 5mm hook and we're going to finish up with our bottom band. So getting started with our bottom band, we're going to insert our 5mm hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and now we're just going to put 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way around. So start by finding our first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop and then do 1 single crochet. This is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook into there with 1 single crochet as well, and that's pretty much it. Continue to put 1 single crochet into every side row. When we don't have any more left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space, and then I'll meet you guys back. Alright, so now that our single crochet row is all finished up, next thing we're going to do is work on the length. So from here, right after we slip stitched into that chain space, we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our bottom band to be, and I'd like for mine to be about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 5. Now that I have my chain, I will be blocking off that last chain, do a chain 1, and then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, let's insert with a slip stitch, insert, yarn over, pull through everything, and we're going to put 1 slip stitch into every chain. And now that we have 1 slip stitch into every chain, we need to connect it into the base. So start by finding that next available stitch. I'm going to insert my hook into there, pull through everything, and there is my first row all finished up. And our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, so we're going to need to work our way up to the following row. So just slip stitch into that next stitch, flip our work, and then make our way all the way down, putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And now that we're at the end of our row 2, chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the base once more. And now that we made our way all the way down, find that next stitch into the base, slip stitch into there to close off this row, and then just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then that is it. We're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases, and I'll meet you back when we don't have any more stitches left to work into so we can seam it together. Alright, so I've made my way all the way around with my back loop slip stitch bottom band. I don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now let's seam it up together. Now this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, so the same seam that we did for the collar, so since we already know how to do that, let's just do the first one together. We're going to start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out, and insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Yarn over, pull through everything, and what we're going to do from here is find that first stitch within the front panel, and insert only in through that front loop, and then we're going to find that next available stitch into the back panel, and insert our hook only in through that back loop. And now that we have those 3 loops on our hook, we're just going to yarn over, pull through all 3, and that is it. From here, we're just going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, and now that our bottom band is all seamed up, we are all done with our piece. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!